Everybody's got a story, you just have to listen. Hola, I'm Joe Partavila, and this is Good Listen, and I'm super excited to kick off a new season with Renee Graziano. Do you love mob movies? I know I do. I could probably watch Goodfellas every day for the rest of my life, but I've always wondered what it's like to actually live in a family that's involved with the mob. Well, Renee knows a thing or two about that. Her dad was a high-ranking official with a crime family in New York City. We're going to get into all of that, but what is it like to be a kid in that, and how do you end up after living that sort of life? So we're going to get into all of that, and I'm super excited to get into my conversation with Renee right now. Renee, welcome to Good Listen. How are you?
Good. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, Renee. So I'm so excited to talk to you because I feel like we're very similar but different. Obviously, the mob stuff we'll get into, but the fact that you're a lifelong New Yorker, you still live in Staten Island, born and raised, and I, lifelong New Jersey kid, born and raised, and I never thought in a million years that I would ever leave. I remember I was at a party in LA years ago, and I was talking to a friend and a person we just met, and I walked away, and the guy said to my friend, "Man, that guy's really New York." And I had no idea what that meant, but I guess as New Yorkers, we kind of know what that means.
I think it's our personalities are so big, and I think that we don't have filters.
Right.
Well, I know I definitely don't have a filter.
Yes, no, you certainly do not. And I think my filter is probably not as open as yours, but I get it. But 4 or 5 years ago, I moved down to Charleston, South Carolina, and it's like a whole new world. Like, it's just amazing. And the reason I bring this up at the start is you're born and raised in Staten Island. Staten Island runs through your veins. And I know you have family all over the Northeast, but in New Jersey as well. But could you ever imagine in a million years you ever not living in Staten Island?
Okay, well, I'm born in Brooklyn.
Okay, bro, I apologize.
That's okay.
Yeah.
So I lived just for the first 3 years of my life. But my parents are from New York City, and then, then Brooklyn, and then Staten Island. So being that really I'm 55, so 52 years of my life I spent in Staten Island. And I just think for me, like, I tried Florida not too long ago, like a few years back. And then last year I was away in California for almost a year. And there was no place like home. No place like I don't fit in Florida. I definitely don't fit it in California. But I find it, even in New Jersey, I don't totally fit in. If it's North Jersey, I fit in more. But like down the shore where my mom is, people are just very, I don't know, they're different. They're not like that. They don't have that New York hustle. I think the New York hustle is just not in our work, but the way we talk and walk, we're like always moving and grooving.
Yeah, it's so funny you mentioned the North and South aspect of it. It's very much very Confederacy, Civil War. Like, if people outside the tri-state area don't understand that there's a difference between North Jersey and South Jersey, and let's not get started about Central Jersey because no one even knows where that is. But it's funny how the personalities are so different. So why do you think, like Florida, I would think, since there's so many transplants there, no one's actually from Florida. What was it about Florida that you didn't stick with you?
Well, I was in Wellington is where I was, which is west, and it's like very affluent, like, the equestrian, the horse riders, and meanwhile I'm looking at them like I'd walk into like, Starbucks. I'm like, give me a mocha, whatever, and they would look at me, and I'm like, did I say it wrong? I didn't say oat milk. I said whole milk, and I just think that although there's a lot of New Yorkers, those New Yorkers are now on a slower schedule.
Okay.
And I don't think for me, I'm there yet. I have 4 grandchildren. I can't slow down for a really long time now.
Right.
Yeah, and I'm just not, it seems as though everybody in Florida, like, let's go to the beach. Like, that's not what you can do. Like, for me, although it sounds wonderful, I don't have millions in the bank where all I could do is go to the beach.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like, I'm not in that tax bracket. So Florida, I'm not ready for Florida yet.
Okay. All right. So one of these days. All right. So let's go back. You mentioned the fact that you spent 52 years of your life in Staten Island, and a lot of that was living under this like sort of cloud of being part of an organized crime family. And for many people like me, you first came to our radar when we watched Mob Wives on VH1, and it was one of those classic reality shows, and that was during the height of reality TV. And I always wondered, now looking back, Renee, people will say, you can't do that anymore. Like, you can't do this in 2024. And to think, like, if you think back to 2011 when your show was on, Like, imagine doing that show in 1989. Like, no one in your family would have
Woo!
even considered that. But in
No, I think
2011,
they
you
would have
did.
killed us. In '89, they might have whacked us in '89. They might have when the mob was still really very, very relevant, we would have been whacked. Sure. I think, well, thank you for the compliment about Mob Wives. I think Mob Wives is a classic. I think there could never be another show that could ever be even halfway close to Mob Wives. And I mean, I love the Jersey Shore and the Housewives, but they're just different lanes. You know what I mean? And shout out to Jersey Shore. They just celebrated 15 years. I love it. I absolutely love it. I wish Mob Wives would have come back. Um, However, now at this stage in my life with 4 grandchildren, I can't imagine subjecting my family to my outrageous behavior. Nor would I want, like, my grandson will go places and he'll be like, that's my Nene. She's famous. She's a mob wife. And I go like this to him. I go, shh, don't tell nobody. But before I was always like so comfortable with it. And now I gotta tell my 7-year-old, you can't say that, you know?
Oh my
Um,
god, that's so
but I,
funny.
I think Mob Wives was just that one show that comes along in life, lasted 6 seasons, and just will forever be remembered.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
now I gotta ask you because you mentioned the grandkids, and I hate to talk about people's kids and grandkids, but I'm curious, does he get what that means? Like, grandma's famous mob-wise, does sh d at this point in his life, does he know what that actually means?
He understands what famous is.
Okay.
He does because he tells me he wants to be a rapper, and he
Okay.
just asked me for gold teeth.
Wow.
And me being the grandmother, I ordered them.
Of course.
So, but he doesn't know what, like, he asked not too long ago, "What's the mafia?" Um, and me and my son just, like, looked at each other like, "I don't really know anymore."
That's that's actually a truthful answer because
Exactly, exactly. I wish more than anything that my dad was still alive. I'd give anything, any body part for my father to still be alive so my grandson would understand what well, he's got his own father, don't get me wrong, but what a real man, what men
used to
were
be. Yeah.
used to be. And that's not a dig towards every man, but the majority of men now are more like women.
Well, in defense of the men now, your dad grew up in a different time. He was literally one of the top bosses in the Bonanno crime family. Hence your connection to the mob, and your ex was also affiliated
No,
with
he's
that.
a rat. We don't talk about him.
Right? He was a rat, of course.
Yeah,
He
yeah.
ratted
We
on the
don't even talk
organization,
about him.
and that was that. But I'm always curious about people that are inside like that because, as you know, there's been this fascination with the mafia and the mob since probably like Godfather, I would say 1972. Since
Right.
then, people have just been fascinated by it. You know, Scorsese's built a career on making movies about the mob. But what do people? And I know you technically weren't a mobster, but what do people like in your sphere think about the Hollywoodization and the showbization of the mafia? Do you find it funny? Are there things of it that
Oh,
ring true?
definitely a lot rings true, but
Okay.
I think in my personal opinion, I think they kind of like they love it. They're like there's people imitating and recreating them. So it is a sort of what's the word I'm looking for?
Like
A
flattery.
compliment.
Yeah.
It's a compliment in some strange way. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, he wants to be like me. Oh, they made a whole movie. They did, Sopranos, but it's based on real life stuff. And that's the unfortunate part for the children. Those are the things that we really go through. And in Mob Wives, you really got to see some stuff that I never would have ever imagined happening in my life. Never. So I think for the most part, the gangsters don't mind when there's a movie made about them at all. I mean, there's a whole channel like Reels does, like Mafia Week or Mafia Month. I don't think there's anybody complaining. I think they watch it. Like
Yeah.
as many men as I know that says, "Oh, that show." I know so many men that says, "Oh, that's what we watched when we were in jail." So please, like everybody watched Mob Wives at one point or another.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
so funny. You mentioned Sopranos, and it's so funny. I just ran into for a couple of friends of mine. Just randomly mentioned that they're starting to watch Sopranos because they're in their 30s, so they missed that boat.
Right.
But it's funny to now see people experiencing Sopranos, and we all kind of watched it in real time, and now you can binge it and stuff. That
I never
idea.
watched it. I've watched 2 episodes.
What?
I've never, you know what? I think for me, it was so close to home that it kind of felt for me at that time. I'm not saying that it wasn't one of the best TV shows ever created ever. I'm just saying for me, it was a little too personal at that time. And then the one episode I saw of the wife like the wife having the affair with the priest, that was it. Yeah, for me that was like, yeah, okay. That's not happening in the mob. You know what I mean? The wife is not sleeping with the priest. And if the wife did, that's a really big sin.
Yeah,
Especially for the priest.
right.
But
And
for
multiple
me,
levels.
there were certain things for me that were so personal, as if I felt they were on our phones, where they heard specific conversations because it was too real. So it wasn't a show that I tuned into. However, I'm a late bloomer. I am a late bloomer, so I have to watch mob classics. You know what I mean? Because
Okay.
everybody still talks about Tony Soprano as if Tony Soprano was really, the wise guy in real life. But I do know it's based on a wise guy who's now he became, if I'm correct, he's now out in Vegas and became an informant, and it's like the Jersey little fraction of them.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, I know. I should probably not say I've never watched it, but it's my truth.
Yeah. No, and the reason I brought it up, Renee, was the fact of that family life. I was curious if there were any parallels to, because that's one of the great things about the show. Not only did we love watching Tony and his boys get up to no good and be the ultimate anti-hero, but you saw the effect that being a mobster and being the someone who runs a mob, a few episodes that you did watch were, and you said it hit really close to home. Was there something about that home life that you remember as a youngster? Like, were you obvious? Were you? Did you know about your family's involvement and stuff like that?
So I never I found out when I was like 16.
Okay.
Well, I really found out at 16. However, I always knew we were different. I didn't know what kind of different, but I knew we were different. I mean, and true, this is on my grandchildren. I had a fur coat at 7. I had diamond nameplates. I have pictures of me in this white fox coat. I'll never forget it. With, my father had my name embroidered in royal blue, and I was like 7. So no other kid on the block is wearing a fur coat. And I'm going to school like with diamonds and furs, and I say it as a joke, fathers work 9 to 5. My father worked like, 5 to 9. My father worked the opposite hours. I knew there was something there. However, when I was about 16 years old, and my father would always say, you could do whatever you want. You could do whatever you want. Nobody could tell you no. So for me, that was not smart. I will say that. Not smart. Because I got used to saying, do you know who I am? Because my father made me, in my house, I was as big as my father in our house. Like, he allowed his children to be big people. But I was about 16. I was in a nightclub, and I was at the end of the bar with a dear, dear friend, my friend Teddy Persico, who I love more than life to this day. The end of the bar, and some wise guy goes, he says, say hello to TG's daughter. And the guy goes, yeah, our father's a captain. I go, my father doesn't drive a boat. My father don't sail a ship. And I will never forget everybody's expression that they were like, you need to go home and talk to your father. Like, and I went home like crying, Daddy, do you really drive a boat? Is that why you're never home? Do you like a cruise director? Like, I'll never forget that. And when most kids learned about the birds and the bees, I guess for me, I learned about captains and soldiers. you
That's
know, and I
hysterical.
try to joke about it as much as listen, my father never came out and said, "This is what it is," but I knew how to read. I wasn't stupid, and I can watch on TV and in the movies something that looks like my household. You know what I mean? So for me, it just you start to put two and two together and you get four.
Wow. And in terms of your dad, you mentioned the fact that he wasn't working your regular dad hours. He was
Yep.
probably burning the candle at both ends, and tying into Sopranos, you saw Anthony's struggle trying to connect with his kids, like trying to be the. If you don't mind speaking about this, but like, what kind of dad was your dad? Was he one to take you to like Point Pleasant and ride the rides? Did you do fun things like that with dad?
We never missed not one holiday going to see the Rockettes. It gets me very emotional. My father was as hands-on as he possibly could be. You know, trips to Disney World. Granted, my father was in slacks and dress shoes. I'll never forget that. Neither I got a picture of it. But we went away every year to Bermuda. Granted, we stayed in the penthouse in the Southampton Princess. I remember like my childhood. Always at the feast, always at the San Gennaro feast, always Radio City, always saw the tree. Um, Everything I asked from Santa, I got. Every birthday. I know he wasn't as present as my mother, put it that like my mother, but I also believe a man is a man, a woman is a woman. That's the way I think. It's not right. A lot of women would get mad at me for believing that I believe that a woman should be home and a man should be out. That's just what I believe. But I do remember fishing. He bought a boat. He named it Tony's Angels, and he put me and my two sisters' names on it.
Aw.
Crabbing. I have a lot of great memories with my father. However, if you ask my two sisters, they don't have the same memories as I do. We're all super different. I am a daddy's girl. Period. And my father was like the parent. Don't get me wrong, I have the most incredible mother in the world, but I'm a daddy's girl. I think my sisters, one of them was like an outlaw and did everything to piss my father off and
Right.
for attention. Like he was chartering planes home when you weren't chartering plane. Like I remember this. Like she was like doing the robbing the car, crazy stuff. And then my little sister, she grew up where she wanted to do whatever she wanted. So my father was more of an enemy than an ally.
Right.
So I think for me, my father's my hero. They might say my mother is their hero. My father was my hero. And I'm not taking anything away from my mother because I know she's probably standing at the top of the stairs listening to this interview. I'm just saying my father was my hero.
That's awesome.
You
That's
know what I
awesome.
mean? That was my God is my God, but on earth that was I could go to my father and when I tell you anything, no matter how big or small, it was taken care of or I had it. Period. So I mean, how could I look at him and think bad of him? Okay, he went to jail, he committed crimes. I understand that. Those were his crimes. He did his time. He went to jail. Ultimately, we paid the price. Ultimately. Um, but I also think I hold on to a lot of my father because he's no longer here.
Right. And it's funny. There's this term called cognitive dissonance, and it's basically how you disconnect like reality from how you think. Like it's like an example of it is like being a super into science, but also believing God. Like it's that kind of
Right.
thing. So I'm curious how you disconnect the man. Your dad's a hero, and he sounds like he was a great dad for you.
Right.
But then how do you disconnect that from the shit? Like the stuff that that you're aware that is it
Okay.
something, did you just file it away? Like, this is the dad I
No.
know, and that's what he did?
Here's what I know. He's never been convicted of dealing drugs or murder. So as far as I'm concerned, he's not as bad as what's out there.
Okay. Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
There were tax crimes and some organized crime shit and some loan sharking and whatever. These are things that go on outside of the mafia. Oh, there's other people that lend money too. They're just not called organized crime. So I knew that what he did wasn't legitimate. but I didn't see him. I never heard of my father killing anybody.
Right.
So
Okay.
for me, in my head, he's not that bad. You know what I mean? That's how I had to deal with it. In Now that I'm a grown up and I have grandchildren and my son is a normal kid who busts his ass and goes to work and works, 5 a.m. till 5 p.m. I see the difference. And I know that those children aren't going to experience their father going to prison for 15 years of their life and them, eventually having what does my therapist say I have? Abandonment issues.
Okay.
Okay. They say it's abandonment issues. I said he did what he had to do as a man.
Okay.
Again, I disconnect it. He didn't abandon me on purpose, in my mind. In my mind. Anybody who's listening could turn around and say, well, she obviously didn't get to that part of her therapy yet where, he did do it on purpose. He did what he had to do to make sure his family ate. For the whole 15 years my father was in prison, we never wanted for a thing. So, you know what? Anybody could say whatever they want about my dad. That's my father, and he took care of us the only way he knew how to.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
he had no education. It didn't go to school past 7th grade. I think he would probably learn to really write when he was in jail. Like, he wasn't scholastically, he was not, Einstein. However, he was always good with numbers. I'll
Uh,
tell you that much.
yeah. It was.
He soared with numbers. So, listen, with what goes on in the world, a lot of people have to disconnect from who their father is. I guess in that world. Look what we have going on in the music industry. Look what we have going on in Hollywood.
Politics.
There are
Yeah.
there are plenty to politics. There are plenty of children that don't want to believe their father is what society knows what they truly are. So, was my father a monster? No. Was he a criminal? Yes.
Cool. Last thing about tying your dad to Tony Sopranos, because you mentioned the fact that your dad was in Disney World wearing pants, and I remember there was an interview where they asked like cast members or something about if they ever got notes about from actual mobsters, and they said that the only note that they had ever gotten was Tony was wearing shorts at a barbecue, and they said no. No cap, no boss would ever be wearing shorts at a barbecue. That was of all the things as far as that was the one thing. So it's funny that you mentioned that your dad is wearing pants in Disney World.
Straight up, they were like a powder blue, grayish color slack with a black shoe and a dress shirt. I have the picture, and there I am with my ears, and I'm like 12 years old, and this skinny little twig, and he's got the meanest mug on, like he doesn't want to be there,
Or it's probably too
but
hot.
he's
Those
there.
done.
Listen, he probably didn't want to be there. He probably wanted to be out making money while hanging out with the guys playing cards. Who knows? But he was in Disney with his kids.
That's awesome. Awesome. All right. Last thing that was that. So I want to talk about how you transition from this life that you painted, the fact that you essentially you felt like you had a pretty happy childhood. You had a great mom, your dad took care of you and
Yep.
your family. So then what happens after the proverbial rug is pulled out from you? Your dad goes to prison. Like and as we know it, the mob ceases to exist. Like I'm sure there is mafia out there, but not to the extent that it was in the 70s and 80s and 90s even. So what happens in your life? Does your family be like, what the fuck do we do now? Like what are you guys thinking at that time?
I think everything was still not. Maybe they went from roses to tulips, but when my ex-husband cooperated is really when the rug got pulled out. Like that for me was like the biggest shock of my life, knowing that this shit exists. Like people wreck. Okay. I never expected it to be my ex-husband who I took back and on television. But I think the tulips completely wilted when he died, when my father died. And I realized, oh my God, who am I? Like, who am I? My name, no matter where I went, no matter what place I was at, I was Anthony's daughter. Oh, Anthony's daughter's here. Give Anthony's daughter a table. Pick up her check. But it was never Renee. It was Anthony's daughter. So as an adult, here I am at 49, my father passed. And I'm like, who am I? Am I somebody? Am I anything? And I think for me, that's really when my addiction took a hold of my life because I was completely lost. Like I'm only just finding myself now. Like I was left now I'm left without a father, without my status. My status is now ripped from me, you know. And I watched people turn, and I watched people no longer show up, and I watched people not make phone calls to check on my mother. And I'll be honest, I have no respect for there are a small fraction of men that I still respect. Small. Like small. Small. The rest of them, I think they're all shit because everything that I know my father always called people when somebody passed away. There was envelopes. People came by. Always sent Christmas gifts. Everything. It's completely gone. So the whole world, as far as the whole mob world, as far as I'm concerned, has changed. I do not believe the presence of that that those men, not just my dad, but those men, they no longer exist. I don't believe they longer exist. Not in my, my closeness. There are men that most definitely still exist. 1,000,000%. But they're not close enough to me for me to comment. Like they still do what they do. So I think it was very disappointing what my life became. Like I didn't even know what to do. Like what do you do? Like where do you turn to? Like my son not being like my son he's fine now, but getting a job. Usually if you pick up the phone, put him in the union, nobody was looking well, especially because they also have a grudge because of my ex-husband. But at the end of the day, he's my father's grandson and he's my son. So I watched people become everything I despise and dislike.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Wow. And I'd love to unpeel this a little bit. The fact that you didn't realize, obviously, that your husband was going to rat on the
No.
family. And, you see these. And I just recently watched, there was a great show on FX Hulu called Say Nothing. And it's all about the troubles in Ireland, the Northern Irish against the British. And there was a lot of plots about rats. And it's as you've mentioned, and as people know from watching movies, it's like the worst possible thing when it actually happens to you. Like we know what it looks like in movies and stuff. It looks horrible, and then there's like this coldness about it because you then have to like completely cut that person off. But what of all of this was that like the worst of it? Like the fact that your dad is arrested and such, but like the fact that you were married to a rat, was that the worst of all of it?
Okay, well, let's be clear. I was already divorced from him. When I had gotten back with him because okay, so there's many layers to my story. One being that he was I'm a domestic violence survivor. I'm also an SA survivor due to I don't know on social media you can't even say sexual assault anymore.
Yeah, I got it.
Due to by his hand. So I kept everything secretive. My whole life was a secret. My everything that happened to me was secretive. So there were layers that I'd even go back with a person who abused me. And then because in my mind oh, you love me, you must love me. But, he cares enough that he hit me. Very demented. But I could not go and tell my parents anything. And whoever I did tell, they weren't believing me because he had a better story than me. He would be like, "Oh," and this is the truth, and everybody around me knows. He would say crazy stuff like, "Oh, she threw herself down the stairs. That's why she got a black and blue." I was married to a very sick individual. So, but I was sicker than he was because I stayed in this marriage. So when I went back with him after all of this, and mind you, I now have plastic surgery and die on the operating table, which is true. I die. I flatline. I come back to life. And here is my ex-husband saying, you know, I realized everything I did was wrong. All I want to do is be with you. In my mind and my heart of hearts, I'm like, he finally got it. He finally realized. So I take this man back, but he's already cooperating with the government. He's already wearing a wire. He only came back to put my father in prison, to get himself out of trouble for a murder. So if people know anything about the story is way larger than mob wives, than being a mob boss's child. It's layers of how you live in a secret. You live as a secret in your own world because you never repeat what comes out of your house. You never tell. So for me, telling, I was tell you funny. It's not funny, but it's true. I was maybe about 8 years old, and my sister Lana is like 8 years older, 8.5 years older. So she would rob this piggy bank. My father had this big paper mache piggy bank that when he would come off from gambling, he would stuff the money in it, and he would wait till it was filled, and then he would crack it. So my sister Lana would have me play Chicky in the hallway and let her know if somebody was coming as she took the salad tongs and the flashlight and pulled out all the money. Swear on everything holy. So one day my father says we lived on 86 Bridgetown Street. We had daisies with silver on the wallpaper. I'll never forget it, with this yellow Amana refrigerator. He puts me on the table, he gets the hammer, and he goes, let's crack it, Renee, and count money. Because my father taught me how to like count money, like slide with your finger.
Like you said, he is good counting, yeah.
Right. So we crack it, and there's no big bills. And there's only little bills and change. And he says to me, Renee, what happened to the money? And I said, Lana took it. And I got smacked. And he said, don't you ever tell on anybody ever again. And I said, you asked me. And he said, I don't care who asked you. And that lesson that I learned at 8 probably destroyed most of my life, because I never told things that were eventually going to debilitate me and have me rely on, prescription narcotics to deal with my everyday life. So him ratting wasn't even, that was like the tip of the iceberg. Do you know what I mean? The humiliation that came with what he did is really what really like broke me, because I took my son out of school. He didn't graduate. My house is broken into. Everything as I knew it was turning against me. And I couldn't understand any of it, because all of my life we was just so well respected that to lose that, I ultimately blame my ex-husband for my father's passing. I don't care what anybody tells me. My father went away the last time and got he got dementia and he got sick. But it was like those years that he was away, we could have possibly helped my dad, with the right doctors. So for me, it's deeper than you're a rat. It's way deeper. You destroyed my son and his future. You took my father, and ultimately are the reason I became a pretty much of a loose cannon, and didn't, as much as I don't believe in suicide by any means, because it's, against God and you're going to hell. There were days that I wish that I didn't wake up. And though that's my truth. However, all of this happened for a reason. And whether it was for me to tell my story so another woman life is saved, I'm good with it. Today, I'm good with it. But the loss of my father, I'll never make peace with. Like, that for me is, like, I feel like I was robbed.
Yeah.
And for me, that's way deeper than you being, like, him being, he's garbage. He's trash. God has plans for him. I don't have to work. Like, God has plans for him, not, and I don't wish death. That's funny. Everybody's like, don't you wish it? No, I don't. I wish 100 angry Renees every day of your life. That's what I wish. I wish in every person that you look at, you see me.
Wow.
Because that would make me want to kill myself.
All right, I want to put a pin on this part of your life, but you
Go.
mentioned something, and I want to see if I got it right. Are you saying that he got back together with you so he could become an informant, or
No, he was already an informant.
He was already, so he got back to you, but to use you as a pawn, right?
Correct. So what we found out later in the trial and stuff, that he cooperated the first time in 2006. My story doesn't happen until 2000 November 21st, 2011 is the day they took my father. So there was cooperation on his part happening. I don't know who he did, what he was. I don't care. That's not for me. But I know he only came back to put my father had come home. He came back home in the end of August of 2011, and he was gone by like the day before Thanksgiving. So 3 months later. So he only came back to me to put my father in jail. That's the only
Oh,
reason. And more than anything, I think that's probably what hurts. Like, wow, you had it like you used me on that level? Yeah, maybe I'm gonna
wow.
up that to 1,000 angry Renees a day.
Well, I want to end this on a high note because you've taken all this pain and struggle, and you basically created a brand in terms of using your story to help other people, like you mentioned. Multiple books. You have this podcast. I believe you're over a year sober now. Is that
Yeah.
correct?
Yes.
What does it mean now, the fact that you've created this from scratch? For many years, you were just the daughter of the captain, but now you've become your
No,
own
no,
person.
the consigliere. Let's get that one
I
straight.
apologize. I apologize about this. I gotta be careful.
We're
The
not
daughter,
demoting him.
all right, the daughter of the consigliere. So that was your identity.
Yes.
Now you've built this your own. What does it
Yeah.
mean that you were able to take all of that pain and turn it into this?
Huh. It means I'm really tired. It means I'm exhausted. I no, I my podcast, The Crisis Queen, I actually am on hiatus. I'm stepping away from it because it is way too heavy. And as much as I want to share and help and help and help, I don't have to do it that way. So I focus more on doing like my sister's podcast, the Straightened Out podcast, more of the lane of this like the reality TV, my wheelhouse where I know. Um, I loved that I was able to help as many people as I did, but I'm not completely in a place where I can do that yet. Like I could donate, I could show up, I could do whatever, but I have to be able to go home and not attach myself to somebody else's trauma. Unfortunately, I don't know if you know about energy transfer, but like it's a like so energy transfer is a real thing. So if you walk in a room and everybody's in a bad mood, you're going to end up in a bad mood. So if you so for me to sit and listen to these stories that are horrific next to mine, I was taking it home. And that's not healthy for a person who's, newly, in sobriety and everything. So I put it on hold. I will be doing interviews with some people, but not on that level. And I appreciate every guest I've had. It's still airing. There's still more to come, but I have to focus on more on things that are happy. Like I have 4 grandchildren. My focus has to be on making sure they never experience any of the shit that I did or my guests did. I want them to live a happy and healthy life. Yes, they're going to go through normal, children things, but I don't ever want them to have to feel or their therapist to say to them, your father abandoned you. Or, your grandmother was a kook. Or, your grandmother was a drug addict. Or I don't ever want that. So I think my focus now is more just we need to laugh a lot more. Life has been way too serious these last how many years? And people are broke and they're tired and frustrated. And I think laughter is more important than anything for the world right now. So I think for me it's more about trying to make people laugh than being, the shoulder for somebody to cry on. I'll always be that privately, but I don't need to be that publicly because it'll destroy me. And as selfish as this might sound, I don't think it's selfish that I care about myself.
No, absolutely not.
So I think for me, turning it into a brand and making it what it's been a glorious ride, you know. Yeah, I went through some tunnels that were dark, but I came out. I always came out. So I think I'm going to focus more on the light that's at the end of the tunnel or the light that I'm walking into as opposed to what's behind me. I shared with you what I did because people people always will say, "Oh, she's the crazy one," or "Oh, she's this one." I'm crazy for a damn good reason.
Right. You have the receipts. Yes.
Yeah, I have the receipts and some plastic surgery scars to prove it. I I I want to be somebody's I'm single and now we're going on 19 months of no contact. So I think I have to focus more. Everything has to be about like healing myself. 2025 is about not finding a mate or just finding that happiness that I want to get up and do things. And I get my grandson, we have weekends, like on Fridays, like he sleeps over and we do all this fun, like we go to a movie, we go for sushi, and it's some of the happiest time. I make dance videos, like my TikTok videos with my grandkids. Like I have twin girls that are almost 2 years old now. Like that's what my life is supposed to be about. It's not supposed to be about everything from the past. It's supposed to be about the present and the future.
Awesome. Well, if folks want to keep up with their future and what's going on, where should they start? Where do you like to post stuff? Instagram, TikTok? Where do they look?
I'm more of an Instagram, and it's Renee. Everything is Renee Graziano. Everything is my name. So it's the real Renee Graziano on TikTok and Facebook, and everything else is just Renee Graziano.
Awesome. Renee, it's been a bunch of laughs. Thank you so much for sharing your story. I wish you the best of luck in 2025. Thank you very much.
Thank you, honey. Have a great day.
And that's going to do it for this week's Good Listen. Thanks so much for spending time with me. I know there's a lot of other things you can watch on YouTube or listen on Apple or Spotify, but I really appreciate you taking the time. If you want to reach out, contact me, just go to joepardavila.com. You can catch up on past episodes there. But until next time, I will see you then. Adios.